Hey everyone, Mr. Foster here. Wrapping up what has been a really long week. Well, not really wrapped up. I teach on Friday, as well, but more or less done with the week. For English 1020 Comp 2 Northeast State online, we need to talk about this poem, right? So we have moved on to our second unit of Comp 2, which is poetry. Okay. So obviously before we were working with short stories, but now we've moved on to poems, poetry. And to start this unit, start this section, we're looking at a tough one. The first poem that we're looking at in this unit is difficult, and I picked it for I picked it for several reasons, but the difficulty level of this poem um, is pretty high. But I think that's okay. That's something that we can get through and that we can work with. So, this one is a little bit tricky to do in an online class. It's a lot easier for me to work through it with you all in person, with a regular in-person class. But we're gonna make our best attempt at going through it in an online learning environment, and hopefully I can walk you through it and explain it. So this poem is by one John Keats, who it was once said of Keats that if he had lived a long life, he would have probably gone on to be a better writer than Shakespeare, which is a pretty big compliment. But the problem is Keats died when he was only like 25 years old. So just a little bit of biographical background. Keats was a poet who was very obsessed with um what's the word I'm looking for? Keeping beauty alive. I guess is the best way to say it. He was obsessed with maintaining beauty and was terrified of losing beauty and of aging and losing the natural beauty you have when you're young. And kind of ironically, he only lived to be 25, so his fears for himself, I guess, never really got fulfilled of growing old and aging and losing the beauty of youth. But it was something he was really obsessed with. And we see it pop up in his poetry, of course, along with many other things. And he wrote several odes. The one we're looking at this week is one of them. So this poem is Ode to a Nightingale, which is obviously like a songbird, right? So if you whenever I teach this poem in class, I always put up on the screen a picture of a nightingale, so we can see what kind of bird this poem is an ode to. And the nightingale is, a songbird. It has a song and a song that it sings. And understanding that is really important to understand this poem. Okay. So this poem has 8 separate sections in it. And whenever we talk about poetry, if we have a poem like this that's broken up into sections, obviously we can just refer to the individual section that we're in. But typically poems are divided into what we call stanzas. Okay. Stanzas that are made up of individual lines. So in this poem, we have 8 sections or 8 stanzas that each have about 10 lines in them. So this is a roughly 80 line long poem. So it's a decent sized poem. It's not the longest poem ever written by any means, but it's not the shortest poem either. So let's talk about what's happening in this poem. All right. So before we really get into it, a couple things to make a note of is that when we're talking about poetry, we have um, stanzas, we have lines, but you always want to make sure you make the distinction of saying that the person in the poem is called the speaker, okay? So the speaker and the poet are 2 different things, okay? So in this case, we have our poet, who is John Keats, but the speaker, whenever you're talking about poetry, is not the same thing as the poet. All right, the speaker is the one who is telling us what happens in the poem, and it can be really easy to obviously want to say that the poet is the same thing as the speaker, but they're two different things. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So we have, in this case, the speaker referring to themselves in first person. Okay, so let's go through this poem, and as we go through it, I'm assuming you all have already read it once on your own. So I'm going to kind of read through it, stop at certain places, and help explain some things. All right. Turbo has made an appearance, so this is my cat Turbo. Say hi, Turbo. And hopefully she will not. This will probably be a little bit of a longer video, so hopefully Turbo will not try to mess with anything too much. All right, so section one of Ode to a Nightingale. Our first person speaker starts here. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness. It's been a long week. A drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute past, and lithe had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Okay, so that's section one. In this first section, we have to understand what kind of contrast is being set up for us here in this poem. Okay, so the contrast that is at the center of this poem is going to be the contrast between the way our speaker feels and the nightingale who is kind of in the background of the speaker's area, whatever you want to call it, close to the speaker, but in the background. Okay. So we see this contrast set up inside this first section. So we see our speaker who is obviously going through it, right? Our speaker is in a hard spot right now. They're not feeling too great about themselves. So it says that they have heartache, their heart is ache, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense as though of hemlock, which is a poison, right? Hemlock is a poison. They had drunk or emptied some dull opiate into the drains. Now, uh, opiate is exactly what it sounds like there. Opiate is opium, right? We still have an opiate crisis today in our current day and age. It's the same thing that's being referred to here in this poem. Okay. Now, after those opening lines, this is where the nightingale comes in. Okay. So we see the words thy, thine, and thou, right? So obviously that's just the late 18th century, early 19th century way of saying you, right? So if we just replace those words in that line or in those lines with you and your and so on, it would say that you, or going back, sorry, a couple lines before that, line number five, tis not enough, or sorry, tis not through envy of your happy lot that being too happy in your happiness, that you, light-winged dryad of the trees, and dryad is just another way of saying like an elf or a nymph, or something that moves very quickly and lightly through the trees. And then the closing lines of the first section are just some pretty nature imagery. So in some melodious plot, that just means in like some pretty picturesque plot of land that is pretty and green, that has numberless shadows. And then once again, these thy and thou and thine are referring to the nightingale. All right, the bird. So our speaker is talking about the bird right now, the nightingale, who is happy and singing of summer in full throated ease. So if you pull up a picture of a nightingale, you'll see it singing with its mouth open. And that's what the speaker is talking about right here. So in the opening section, we get the contrast between the kind of heaviness and sluggishness and pain that the speaker is feeling and the happy lightheartedness of the nightingale who is singing its song of summer with full throated ease. Okay, so the contrast of the heavy kind of pain that the speaker is feeling, that goes through, if you have your textbook, the Leith words is a reference to the river in hell or Hades. So the speaker is really in this position of pain and suffering for not necessarily physical pain and suffering, but a mental or emotional pain and suffering that they're going through. Okay, and they contrast the way that they feel with this nightingale who is very light and goes through these pretty scenes of nature and sings their song, their summer song with full throated ease. So that is the contrast that is established in the opening section. Okay, section 2, the easiest way to sum it up is the speaker in section 2 is talking about wanting to drink wine. Okay, that's the easiest way to sum up section 2. So they're saying in section 2 that that drinking wine could help them feel better in a way. And the wine that's being described here is not just any wine. It is like the best wine. It's like really, really good. Very good wine. So section 2 is basically just a bunch of poetic language describing a wine that is so good and so tempting to drink that it would kind of fix the problems that the speaker is going through. Okay. You see that if you've ever drank a lot of red wine before, it stains your mouth purple. You'll wake up with a purple mouth the next morning. And it even says that. It says purple stained mouth in line 18, I believe, right there. So basically all you need to know to understand what section 2 is talking about is that the speaker is really, really, really tempted to drink this delicious wine that would, it says in the closing lines of section 2, it says, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim. So, another thing I want you to keep in mind as you're going through this poem is that in each one of these sections, we get a mention of the nightingale. All right. So the bird, the nightingale, is always there. It's always there, no matter what. So we only get a one line mention of it in section 2, where the speaker says that if they drink the wine, this delicious wine that they're describing, they would leave the world unseen and fade with thee. So again, anytime we have a thy, a thou, or a thine, or thee, that's talking about the bird, the nightingale. Fade with thee into the forest dim. Okay? So the speaker is saying in section 2 that they are tempted to drink a delicious wine and that would like make their problems fade away, right? Section 3 kind of picks back up with this idea of fading away. It says fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget. So again, picking up where section 2 left off and talking about what the effects of the wine would have. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget. The wine would do that for them. The wine would help them forget and dissolve and do all this other stuff. What thou amongst the leaves hast never known. Okay? So once again, we're talking about the nightingale in contrast to the speaker. All right, in contrast to the speaker. So the speaker is saying, bird, nightingale, you are lucky because you, amongst the leaves, talking about the nightingale and the trees, have never known the weariness, the fever, and the fret that men have to deal with, that people, that humans have to deal with. Okay? So basically, section 3, and this is kind of what I'm going to do to avoid this video going on for too long, since I'm assuming you all have read the poem on your own already. So you've read these lines and you might be like, well, I don't really know what this is talking about. So I'm just trying to sum up and explain what each section means. So section 3 is saying that from the speaker in relation to the nightingale, once again, the speaker is saying that, bird, you're lucky because you don't have to worry about these things that humans have to deal with. Um, I will say, make a note in section 3. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that Keats, the poet, the actual poet himself, Keats, was obsessed with aging, was obsessed with keeping beauty preserved. And we see that here. We have the capital B, beauty. Beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes. And he has these mentions of growing old, right? Palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs. So it's hard to read a poem by Keats and this not come up, right? Keats was obsessed with like maintaining eternal youthful beauty and not growing old. And we see that here in section 3. And the reference that we get to the not the mockingbird, the nightingale, he's saying that what thou amongst the least has never known, that the nightingale doesn't have to worry about the same kind of stuff that people have to worry about, or at least our speaker is worrying about. Okay. Section 4. Away, away, for I will fly to thee. Right? Once again, the nightingale is the thee in the line. So here we have what we call an allusion or a reference. All right. So it says, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards. Bacchus is the Roman god of wine. I believe it's Roman. It tells us somewhere in here. It just says god of wine. He was either like the Roman or the Greek god of wine. But basically, all this section is saying is that um, it says that the speaker will not be charioted by Bacchus and his pards, and pards in this line is short for leopards. This god of wine had a chariot that was led by leopards. So pards is just short for leopards. Excuse me. So basically, all that section 4 is saying is that the speaker will refuse to drink. Okay. So we saw in the previous section, section 2, that the speaker described the wine and was like, this wine is amazing. It's delicious. It's very tempting and it could help me get away from these problems. But section 4 says, I'm not going to do that. He's basically saying, I know drinking would be nice, but I'm not going to do it. I'm actually not going to do it. And then we see again the thee talking about the nightingale. So what we see in section 4 is the speaker kind of like turning away from the idea of drinking that wine, saying I'm not going to do that. I'm going to kind of turn my attention to like how beautiful the night sky is and the nightingale, right? So section 4 ends with just some more imagery of like the night sky and the nature scene at night. So it's just pretty poetic language that's describing the moon and the stars and the night sky, and then the way that the nature looks at night. That's all it's saying. Section 5. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn and pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, in mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Okay, section 5. Um, so let's see. Is section 5 maybe the only section that doesn't mention the nightingale? It might be. So, section 5. I think this will be our only section that does not give us a mention of the bird, of the nightingale, but instead our speaker gets very fixated on um, kind of nature in full bloom. Okay. So when it says mid May, that's literally just talking about the middle of the month of May. Okay. So section 5 is basically just describing when it's like late spring, early summer, and all of the vegetation and flowers are like at their fullest. They're the most bloomed. And that's what he's describing here. And kind of just stopping to appreciate how beautiful that time of year is. and stopping to like pay attention to the way that the flies kind of buzz around on summer evenings. So section 5 is really just like a section that appreciates the beauty of like a late spring, early summer evening. Like imagine if you're out on a walk and it's like 8 o'clock on like let's say it's May 20th or something like that. And you're in that late spring, early summer time period, and you're just stopping and appreciating how nice it is outside. That's basically what section 5 is, right? We take a turn in section 6. So, to sum up section 6, our speaker basically admits to having suicidal thoughts, saying, I've been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many amused rhymes. So, we have a personification of death. And our speaker saying that now more than ever, seems yet rich to die, to feast upon the midnight with no pain. But the mockingbird I keep calling it the Nightingale. The Nightingale comes back in. The Nightingale comes back into the poem here in section 6. And our speaker talks about how, while thou, the bird, the Nightingale, are pouring forth thy soul abroad in such ecstasy, saying, the bird is singing this song so amazingly. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. So it says to the nightingale song, our speaker like is not hearing it. Even though it's there, our speaker is not hearing it. They're not listening to it. They're not paying attention, even though it's in the background. Section 7. Thou were not born for death, immortal bird. The nightingale, our immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down, saying, no hungry generations, time does not weigh you down, nightingale. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown, perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth. We get a biblical allusion to Ruth, a character from the Old Testament in the Bible. Basically, all section 7 says is that this song has always been here all throughout time. It's been heard in ancient days by both emperor and clown. What this means is that um, no matter what kind of status you are in life, you could be at the highest end of status or the lowest end. The song is the same no matter what. It's always been there for everyone. It's just up to you to pay attention to listen to it. So that's essentially all section 7 says. Section 8, the final closing section of this poem. Forlorn. The very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul self. Okay? So this is important that now in this closing section of the song, our speaker has kind of snapped out of it. Whatever kind of like funk that they were in, whatever kind of mental rut they were in, they've kind of snapped out of it by this point. Okay? And it says that this very word is like a bell to toll me back from you, the nightingale, to myself, to my soul self. I remember who I am. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Basically, it's saying that go, like, I want these thoughts to go away. I'm not going to be tricked. I'm not going to be fooled. Adieu, I do, adieu, adieu, saying goodbye. Thy plaintive anthem fades. So it's saying that the nightingale song is fading. It's going away now that the sun is basically coming up, I guess. It says it goes past the near meadows, over the still stream, up by the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. And our speaker closes the poem with some questions. They're like, was this real? Did I actually experience this, or was this some kind of vision or a dream? Fled is that music? Do I wake or sleep? So it ends on this question of like, what was that I just experienced? Okay. But you could make an argument that by the end of the poem, our speaker has kind of snapped out of what they were going through. Um, from considering the song of the Nightingale has kind of like saved our speaker in a way of making them snap back to their senses and saying, I'm going to like clear my head, get out of this mental funk that I'm in, and kind of come to my senses because I've now considered the song of this nightingale. Okay. So to keep this video from being over 30 minutes long, I'm going to go ahead and stop there for right now. So I will upload this. Probably I might need to actually upload this to YouTube because it might take forever to upload it to D2L. But hopefully this video has helped you understand this poem better. And as soon as this gets uploaded, I will give you a quick update on what I want you to do before we start with next week. So like I said, I hope this video was helpful, and hopefully you can kind of get what this poem is about a little bit better with me walking through it with you. I will see you in the next update, and I hope you all have a good weekend.